Hey guys, how's it going? This is HelpfulLockPicker here, and last week in video 251, we went over what lockbuster keys are, why someone might use one, and why you should be very careful if you ever decide to use one. You never want to use one in a lock that you do not own, and do not want to take responsibility because you will likely break the lock. These keys are not easy to get out, and they are designed that way. And what I'm going to do today is give you a close-up view on how you can remove one of these keys, and I'm going to provide you with several techniques. More information is coming up on this topic in just a second. Please stay tuned. So what is going to be the first step in order to remove a lockbuster key out of a door? The first thing you're going to need to do is be able to get access to the secured side of the door. The secured side is the side where you're going to be able to take out some screws and remove the lock out of the door. If you're not able to get access to this side, you're going to need to get a little bit more creative. But the first step in order to get this lockbuster key out is we're going to need to be able to get the entire lock cylinder out of the door, and then we'll proceed to the next step. So the next step is going to be analyzing our plan of attack, and there are several different methods that can be very successful in removing a lockbuster key. As you can tell, this lockbuster key is very stuck inside this lock, and we're going to want to get it out in order to make this lock work again. So the first thing I notice on this lock is when you look at the top here, you can see that it has grub screws in each chamber. If we remove those grub screws, we're going to be able to dump out all of the key pins, driver pins, and springs. Once all of those pins are removed, we'll be able to take the key out because nothing will be holding it in place, and then we'll be able to reset the lock very easily. If your lock does not come with grub screws, you could always take a drill and drill out each chamber and dump all of the pins out yourself. But one thing you're going to need to consider is you're going to need to come up with a way to plug these holes if you're going to want the lock to work like it did before. Many people are able to put some threading in here and add some grub screws themselves and just make it a very convenient thing to do. But sometimes your lock will present in a different way and you can get this key out much easier. If you have a lock where you have access to the tailpiece in the back, you're going to be able to do a method where you cut off the bow of the key and you're going to just leave the shaft of the key in the lock. What differs on this lock from the previous Euro cylinder lock is you're going to have access to the back here. When you have access to the back of the lock, you're going to be able to remove this tailpiece. And once you have this key cut down all the way to just the shaft of the key, you're going to be able to just push it through and then pull it out the back. A lockbuster key is designed to go in one motion, and that is just in the insertion direction. So once you have the physical barrier of the key removed, you're going to be able to just pull it through and take it out very quickly. So these are two very viable options in order to remove a lockbuster key, and I'm going to show them to you more closely in just a moment. So what is top gutting? Top gutting is going to be removing all of the key pins, driver pins, and springs through the top of the lock. On this lock you can see I conveniently have grub screws going across the top that I can remove with an Allen wrench. If you do not have grub screws already, what you can do is drill your own holes, but you're going to need to be very careful. But before we get started with removing the pins through top gutting, I just want to highly recommend that you have a dedicated pinning tray in order to keep all of your pins in order. If you do not have a pinning tray, what you can do is take a piece of corrugated cardboard and peel it in half and use all of the corrugations to separate all of your pins. So when we get first started with the top gutting, I'm going to remove the very first grub screw, and we're going to need to be very careful that we do not lose any of our pins. Once the grub screw is out, the spring and the driver pin and the key pin are going to be able to get lost. So what we're going to do is just carefully place the grub screw in slot number 1. We're going to carefully remove the spring, and once the spring is out, we're going to take out the driver pin and the key pin together. I'm going to just dump them into this slot right here so they do not get lost. And now that I have them out, I'm going to put the driver pin in its own slot and the key pin in its own slot. You're going to need to be very careful that you do not mix any of the key pins up because you want the original key to still work. So we're going to take out the rest of the grub screws and all of the pins, and then we're going to show you how to get this key out. Now that we're down to our final pin, once we dump out the spring, the driver pin, and the key pin, nothing's going to be holding this key in place, and we're going to be able to remove the lockbuster key. So I'm going to dump those out right now, and I'm going to put them back in their order so nothing gets lost. And I'm going to show you a very close-up of none of the pins being in the lock so you can see exactly what that is going to look like. So now that all the key pins, driver pins, and springs have been removed out of this lock, nothing is going to hold this lockbuster key in place. With just a little bit of wiggling around in the lock and pulling it out, you can see that the lockbuster key came right out. This has been the top gutting method. This is one of the easier methods to utilize if you have access to the top of the lock. Now I'm going to go into the next method. So what do you do when you do not have easy access to the top of the lock? What I'm going to do is propose to you a secondary method. What we're going to do is we're going to cut off the top of the key where the bow is, and we're just going to leave the shaft of the key inside of the lock. When you take a look at the lockbuster key right here, I'm going to cover up the area that we're going to cut off, and you can see just the shank of the key is going to be left on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that off. We're going to take the tail piece off the back of the lock, and we're just going to push the entire key through and pull it out the back. Alright, so now we're in my basement, and what we're going to do here is we're going to use my Dremel. And with this Dremel, we're going to try to cut off the bow of the key and just leave the shaft. We're going to try to push the shaft through the lock and pull it out the back. And we're going to see what that takes right now. Alright, so we're going to take this lock upstairs, and we're going to see what it takes to push this through right now. As you can now tell, we're back upstairs, and what we have done is we have cut the bow of the key off with the Dremel, and the shank of the key is just left inside of the lock. This is going to be very important because we're just going to push the rest of the key out the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this lock right on over. I'm going to take out the screws in the back that holds on to the tail piece, and then once the tail piece is removed, we're going to be able to get this key out. I'm going to carefully put these screws off to the side so we do not lose them, because we want to have this lock working once again. So once we have the tail piece out, what we're going to do is we're going to get something to push this through. I recommend just using a key blank or another key to the keyway. This is the Kwikset KW1 keyway, so I'm just going to take a KW1 key, and I'm just going to push it on through. We're going to keep on pushing, and we're going to force this out the back of the lock. Now you can tell the lockbuster key has been removed. We were able to remove it by cutting it in half, and this is just a very viable way to get our locks recovered. I just want to say thank you guys so much for checking out this video. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, please subscribe. As always, thank you so much for checking out this video, and I hope you all have a great day. And just please be careful with lockbuster keys.